yesterday I talked about this model of creation, how there's infinite consciousness, eternal infinite spirit, and then we have the more subtle realm, which includes the experience of our dreams, our emotions, our thoughts, our memories, our deepest longings and yearnings, and our capacity to perceive the subtle things. And then we have the physical creation, which is what we all see right now. We all agree that, we can see that harmonium or the camera. And the path of the yogi is to learn to feel from this gross state of consciousness back up through the subtle state until you reach the experience of spirit. When most people learn yoga meditation, and yogic practice, what they're doing is they're learning techniques which harmonize the body and the mind. And that's an excellent first start. Some people, they'll make comments like, Yogananda didn't teach the authentic Kriya Yoga because he didn't get into some of these deeper aspects in his public talks. Well, imagine being an Indian Swami coming over to America in the 1920s and trying to talk about the subtle nature of Purusha and Prakriti. How do you think that would go over? But what could he do? He could teach people, this is how you breathe. This is the technique that you use to circulate life force through the body. Here are the Yoga Sutras. Here's the Bhagavad Gita to begin to plant the seeds of awareness of what is possible. Did Yogananda know the higher procedures? He absolutely did. Did he teach them to students that he had that showed a capacity to grasp these subtler principles? He most certainly did. But he didn't do it on a broad level. He didn't do it on this mass level because the masses couldn't quite grasp it at that time. In fact, at this time, the masses often can't quite grasp it. So what we have to remember is what we learn in yoga and meditation, they are preparations to allow you to go inward, to experience your inner spiritual consciousness. Now, what happens to most people when they start to go inward? Anybody know? They go to sleep. Okay. So our task is first and foremost to learn to do well with sitting upright, with going through the breathing exercises, with learning how to cut ourselves off from external distractions and learn to go within. But our next task is to stay awake once we go in. You'll hear me say sometimes, and I learned this phrase from Vyas Houston of the American Sanskrit Institute, when you go into meditation, I will say things like, relax as if you're relaxing into a dream. Now, most people interpret that as go to sleep. And that's not what I mean. I mean, be upright. Let the body be as relaxed as possible, but flow your awareness within as though you're moving into a dream state. Because in yogic philosophy, our purpose, our goal is to move from the waking state, which is what we consider this to be, to the dream state, which is the subtle state within, into the deep sleep state, which is deeper than even dreams as we know it. And you have to do it consciously, which means you have to do it while you are awake and present. This is why the idea of yoga nidra, again, yoga nidra is often treated in yoga studios as just a glorified way to relax, full body awareness relaxation. And for that purpose, it's really healthy for you and it's really good. But yoga nidra from a yogic perspective is to be able to exist in the states of dream in the same way that you know who you are right now, right? I don't mean to identify with who you are, but I mean right now, hopefully all of you are awake. It looks like you all are. And you are able to, the presence that you have right now, the idea is to maintain that presence even when dreams start. And so dreams are happening, and then the dream world becomes as real as what you have here, and the you that is here now observing this is there then, and then you get better at it until eventually dreams go away, and you can't describe it, no one can, but imagine that there's no awareness of anything, but there's just the sense of existence being. And that you that is aware of me talking or aware of what you had for breakfast is as much there in that state as well. So that's what it means when yogis say you're moving from the waking state to the sleep state, to the deep sleep state, and you're doing it consciously. That's what we're aiming to do. What does this have to do with devotion? Well, this takes devotion to want to do this and to actually do it. I was talking with one of my students this morning whose wife is getting her PhD in physics. And he said she's in hermit mode. She's just studying all the time. And I thought about that. So she's studying physics and she's studying all the time. And I wanted to know, what does that mean all the time? Does that mean she spends an hour a day studying physics and the rest of the time she's doing other things? And he said, every waking hour she is studying for this. And I said, does she take a day off? He said, no. So here we have someone who is studying physics every waking hour, every day. But what do we want to do? Well, I'll meditate for half an hour every day. I'm sure I'll experience God in this lifetime, right? You see the difference? So when we talk about devotion, that is devotion, right? That is devotion. And I've seen this with everyone who's successful in the things that they do. Another student, a professional violinist in orchestra, how often does she practice? Hours a day, every day. But what do we want to do with our yoga practice? Well, maybe I'll read a little bit of this book for 15 minutes. That's good. And you put it away. So when it comes to devotion, there are different kinds of devotion. And there is real devotion. And real devotion is essentially being engaged in what is important to you. Now, if I'm telling you, you have to learn to go from the waking state to the deep sleep state, to the dream state, to the deep sleep state, and you get good at meditating and you start to fall asleep and you start taking naps when you're supposed to be meditating, what you need to do then is start working out, how can I stay awake and yet relax? And you have to do what this person who's studying physics is doing. You have to spend the time. Do you have to spend every waking hour doing it? No. But you should at least spend an hour, 45 minutes trying. And so part of devotion isn't simply doing what you're told to do, it's doing what you need to do well, right? Doing what you need to do well. When you read Autobiography of a Yogi and you read those stories about Paramahansa Yogananda and so on, you have to remember from a very young age, he was spending hours a day in meditation, and it wasn't this. You understand what I mean? He had to go within and find ways to live such that he could, first of all, learn the techniques and be able to sit still. And then he had to learn to explore this inner world, these inner realms, because once you start to access the dream state, what happens? All these dreams come up. And what happens when you start dreaming, for most people, you just get lost in them. That's why when you wake up, you remember your dreams and you can report your dreams, but it's not that you're actually in your dream when it's happening and you're saying, oh, I'm dreaming. You know, one of the greatest gifts that's been given to me, which was absolutely terrifying in the beginning, was you've heard me talk about this before over the last few years, but sleep paralysis. And when you have sleep paralysis, your mind wakes up, but your body can't move. And it's terrifying at first because it's as though, things are going on around you and you can't move. And the reason that has been such a gift for me is because every single time it happens, I have learned to maintain the presence of my awareness, to know what's going on, to not freak out, and to just abide in my inner world, my inner space. And when it does happen, I can actually use that time for meditation because I don't have the body troubling me, right? And so what happens if one day death comes, and during that moment, something happens to my body and I don't have my body to do anything with anymore. Well, because I have all those moments of training in sleep paralysis to recognize, oh, I'm not my body, it will make it much easier for me to remember to stay conscious as a transition happens. And one of the reasons this has been a thing with me, I talked to a neurofeedback expert about this. He said, usually when people meditate well, these kinds of things do start to happen because the meditator is actually learning to navigate these other fields, these other experiences of consciousness. And so even when they fall asleep, this happens to me. When I fall asleep, my body will be snoring. And Jasmine will reach over and touch me, and I feel her touch, and I'm still asleep, and I know to stop snoring. Because even though it seems like my body is asleep, inside I am still as present as I am right now. And that's taken just years of practice, right? But once that starts to happen, then when you're actually actively meditating, when you're actually sitting up, and the dreams start to come, which for many people are distractions, which make them fall asleep, you can just observe them, say, okay, and you keep going with your process, and eventually the momentum, the energy of those images flow away, and then all you're left with is a sense of pure awareness, pure being. And then you're able to stay as present with that. And when you stay present with it, again, it's not like taking a nap. You know, how many people do you know that when, or maybe you see this in meditation groups, when the meditation is over, everybody's got to stretch, you know, and like kind of come back to reality. Well, when you're actually flowing into those states, you don't have to come back to reality. You just shift back to your body and you get up and you do what you're going to do. So there's no readjustment period. And that's really what we're aiming to do, is to live in such a way that the you, the soul, the Purusha, the presence that exists eternally, infinitely, that is one with Ishvara and so on, that you are as aware of that right now as you would be when you go out to lunch, as you would be when you're going to the dentist, as you would be when you're starting to fall asleep, as you would be when you've had a couple beers with your buddies. That same presence is there. And that is yoga practice, really. And in order to do that, it takes devotion.